Cool.
Okay, so I think I thank you for joining me today. I think I've heard so much about you; it's almost like I know you without knowing you. I think this is the first time we've actually met. Do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Noy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Churney. We're a Danish company predominantly, but with a lot of Israeli roots. And me and my co-founder Brian have helped few app and gaming companies improve their acquisition substantially using their own data warehouse in ways which I suppose we'll take the time to talk about today.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's a fascinating area, and it's high level. It's all around sort of player and cohort LTV, right? If I understand correctly.
So the term LTV is a bit of a funny one, right? Because LTV says, well, let's see how it goes 2 years from now. You
Yeah.
have to land on a little bit of a closer proxy when you're doing your user acquisition. But
Well, and
generally,
with scan, that's got even more important, like being able to judge the value of a player early on.
yeah, with the first envelope, 24 hours, that's true for scan. It's also going to be true for the rest of the industry. But there's one strong differentiation I want to make is that whatever we're talking about now is completely adjacent to attribution. So all those extremely interesting problem of matching and binding users are a little bit outside the question of what it is we're trying to do or what it is we're doing for clients, which is to create an alternative message back to an ad platform. And also is a little bit, interestingly enough, different from what we talk about in terms of cohort usage for PLTV to balance ad platform budgeting. But the main concept that we're thinking about these days, or actually for the last 2 years, has been to correct a sort of a misconception that essentially the most of the market is going for. And that's not only true for games and apps, it's also true for e-commerce, it's true across the board in performance marketing.
Why? Sorry, I'm trying to understand like what is wrong with the way that we've been doing things up until now.
Well, if the correlation between short-term revenue and long-term revenue is good, then nothing is wrong, right? Let's take IAA. You are probably a good part of your listening audience here.
Yeah,
IAA probably does a pretty good job in the first 3, 4, 5 days in an ad platform, as they sort of combine messages of in-app app purchases, in-app advertisements, sending them back to the ad platform. And then if you were to imagine this feedback loop as a way to sort of give a good label for a machine learning model on the other side, on Google, on Meta, on Apple, and hey, this is the ultimate worth, or this is the ranking of the worth of people. Like these guys, more of those, okay with these not so much.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It's like you have a feedback.
Well, you're effectively defining with the networks what a good user to you is. I remember years ago we played with. So we went through a phase when I was at Product Madness of trying to manipulate the postbacks that we were making to networks, and we went through a phase of trying to double up the values and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
any payments that were made, we'd sort of double them to say that they were extra good, kind of thing.
Do you know this Kohelet Bible reference? Nothing new under the sun. So the basic principles you're thinking about, which is to get a much better correlation between what you're thinking is worth and what the ad platform has gotten the notion of worth. All those doubling proxy metrics, level 5 completed, all those things that people are thinking about. There's a much more, let's call it, concise and robust way to do it, which is not so much about let's do a 2 multiplier on these guys because they're better, or people with this user agent are much better, so let's adjust the bid. But to kind of be very disciplined about it.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, God, this must have been like 8 years ago, something like that, when we were playing with the concept of this, and we got to the point where it would work, but it would work for sort of 2 weeks to a month, and then the algorithms would sort of adjust to it. How are you, presumably you come up against the same kind of issues?
First of all, when you're not doing an adjustment that is that brute force, it's a bit harder for the ad platform to learn and to sort of satisfy you on the lowest inventory that would still satisfy the predicate, right?
Yeah.
But all of that being said, there's still the requirement, and this is kind of an interesting one, to use the feedback loop, because you're not just creating predictions. You're creating predictions that influence reality. It's not like, oh, what's going to be the weather tomorrow? It's literally, I'm not going to change the signal. And what you notice, this whole collapse in 2, 3, 4 weeks after modifying, that definitely still exists. And there are multiple ways in which, in particular, Brian and his expertise in causal machine learning, what he did in Spotify research, figuring out how to combat that type of distribution shift.
To keep it live and to keep it continuing. Amazing.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things that people are not thinking about when they're thinking about PLTV models for UA. This is one of them, and hats off for actually even thinking about it. The second thing is exactly how difficult it is to really understand how to activate a signal. So it's one thing to create a nice PLTV model. It may also be very.
How do you mean activate a signal?
Yeah, we call it activate. Our competitors call it. They have a really cute name for it. Maybe I should have gone with that. Orchestrate.
Okay.
So the idea is that different ad platforms have different thresholds and different ways of getting signals. And once you're setting up a signal that is completely new to the ad platform, and it could be completely out of range. Let's say that up until now, all the CACs that you've been running, the entire surface was like, okay, $3, right? And all of a sudden you come with messages like $8. And then how do you build them? Like, what are you supposed to send by the end of hour one? What are you supposed to send by the end of day one? How do different ad platforms treat it differently? So that's what I mean when I say activating the signal.
Got it. And I suppose each ad network has its own nuances and different ways of being able to utilize that data and bring it into their own algorithms, right?
Exactly right. And furthermore, every ad platform would have different products that would treat things fundamentally different. Let's take Meta and bid multipliers, which is a very powerful tool, but requires a lot of experiments to figure out how to not be too aggressive or not be too under aggressive with the bids, and how to set things up right. We didn't really want to become a marketing agency, but some parts of it start feeling a little bit like a marketing agency. Yeah.
But what's so like? I get the area of it's. I mean, for us playing with it when I was at Product Madness, it was like let's have a play and see what we can do. I mean, we were specifically working with Meta at the time to try and manipulate the algorithms there. You're doing it across multiple different networks. How does it represent itself, like in terms of the value that you can drive from that? We were doing it to try and specifically improve the users that the network was sending us. And is that predominantly why you do this?
So you can say in terms of the metric that we care about is long-term return of ad spend. And that's really one of the fun parts, and also like the excruciatingly painful parts working with clients, saying something like, look, if by day 7 it looks worse, that's good. Why? Because if it was perfect or if it was much better, then you probably didn't hit that pocket of performance that you used to miss.
Yeah.
So from our perspective, it's really just about, let's talk about day 30 ROAS, day 60 ROAS, not with your prediction cohort, but literally let's see how this thing sort of matures, which is incidentally one of the reasons to go with day 60 or day 30, right? Further enough into the future to be nicely correlated with ultimate LTV and close enough so that you can test it.
And do you find, like, I mean, obviously your results you're seeing are worthwhile, otherwise it wouldn't be continuing with it. But do you find that there is a definite lift over that period of time by doing this?
Yeah. So firstly, let's be very honest about what it is now.
Yeah.
Very much in, let's call it exploration phase and figuring out what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I'll give, again, those IAA audience of yours sort of bad news. The chances that they have a good possibility for lift is not super high.
Yeah.
Quite not super far off from, let's say, with hyper casual. Right? For hyper casual, it's completely lost. For IAA, you can get a lift. It's with pain.
Yeah.
Right? Hybrid and IAP, that's where it can really shine. Consistency and getting things at volume, that's the thing that we're validating with our clients at this moment, right? And have been for a good number of months. And I'd say that we have a kind of an outlandish, but also kind of a statement that would put things in perspective. We'd say, if we didn't drive a double-digit increase in day 60 ROAS, something is not right.
Okay. Okay.
So that's sort of, you can't really satisfy yourself by saying, oh, we improve by 3%. That's not going to cut the cake.
Yeah.
You have to be at least 10, 12, 15, 20% improved on day 60 ROAS. Now, one of the interesting things that I can say generally, and we're not alone in this, is that we found a really, really nice way of validating preemptively if this is a good idea. So if you go to our website, Churney.io, and you look at Impact Explorer, or now if you go and Google LT Vision, which are two quite similar products in a way, you'd be able to compute what you call a Spearman correlation between day 3 and day 60, or day 3 and day 90. And what this number will tell you, if it's strongly above 0.85, let's say, that numbers means it's not going to be worth it. And if that number is severely under, then you're like, okay, well, there's something here to talk about. So I'd say that realization, I don't know if I say it came a year too late, but we have a good number of clients that we're servicing, and it goes in a certain direction. That today, if we would have given them this Impact Explorer, would say, you know what, it's marginal. Maybe you shouldn't think about it. Alternatively, for those who succeeded phenomenally, that number was very low. Right?
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But then, does that mean it's a bad thing looking at an analysis tool like that when you're thinking about doing this? Like, does it give you enough of or could you end up using it and finding that it's the complete opposite of what this tool shows?
I'd say that it's a revelation, right? Because again, as a company owner, just don't waste your time if this thing doesn't work out. And if it works out, you really, really want to take it into consideration, right?
Yeah.
So from our perspective, it's a win-win. Like, even those, it happens a lot now with IAAs, e-commerce. We bring this thing in, it goes to a 0.87. You go like, all right, you know what? As it stands, don't bother. We saved everybody a lot of time and money, because forget about the fees that companies such as yourselves would incur. The ad spend that you're putting at risk is not minimal, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Statistical significance, exiting learning phase. Not a cheap way of getting a double digit.
I mean, when you're talking about the numbers that you're throwing through, any percentage of saving is massive.
That's absolutely true. And there's a couple of things to remember. One, there's sort of a mental cost in moving from thinking about short-term, like what's happening now, to sort of having a bit of a patience and seeing, day 30, day 60. And we see it now in production. Let's say if you look at customers who are working with AirPlugin on the 28-day PLTV, or not PLTV, but apparently it's not PLTV, but they call it 28-day attribution. Then you see that they have to suffer a little bit.
Right.
I think together with the rest of the market, we're sort of slowly learning how to build that type of motivation and patience on our clients. And in particular, I gotta say, Adam, gaming are not the most patient of UA.
Yeah, gaming's a unique industry.
Yeah, that's you can definitely say that. We see it a little bit funny, right? Like the very big companies we talk to, infinite patience. The smaller companies, you can feel the pressure.
Yeah. But I think that's it to a certain extent. There's a lot more there is a lot more pressure on, and gaming is very pressurized as an industry, I think, and it's very switched on technically as an industry. So having that, like I said, 8 years ago we were playing with this to see if it was something that could generate a lift for us. So you sort of see, especially coming into gaming from a SaaS perspective, you sort of see everything that you're thinking that you can deliver has already been trialed or tested by the likes of Playtika or Aristocrat, or any of the larger any of the larger gaming companies have already sort of given it a shot to see if there was anything that they could do with it. But it's interesting. The sort of, obviously, when you're and I know this from firsthand, when you're building a kind of internal SaaS platform for a company, you lose a lot of the visibility and a lot of the sort of cross-company learnings. And that was always a big problem for me, is you sort of, you become stale because you're only servicing your own company and you're not getting requests and ideas from other places.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, you guys had your stint, I think, Predict for a couple of years.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. We did. We it was, I mean, it was a great product. I think we found that it's not easy to predict. Obviously, it's not easy to predict LTV, and it's not easy to do it in a generic way. I think, you have, when you're competing as a SaaS product, when you're competing against companies that have 20 data scientists, and you're trying to provide a sort of generic product that can be used across multiple different companies, you can't compete with a company that has 20 data scientists focused towards generating a good LTV score. So that becomes much, much harder. I'd be really interested to know how you've tried to conquer that one.
So, I mean, the first point of distinction I think we can make is, as far as I remember, you were trying to do a sort of a type 1 PLTV model, not a type 2, right?
Yeah.
But maybe to further, just to make sure that nobody is lost on what I just said, let's do some small overview of this. So, as we said, using PLTV for user acquisition, there's two ways that I can think of to be useful, right? One of them has to do a little bit with how you're balancing different ad spends. I like to call it poor man's MMM, but I think you get the concept, right? Like, as time goes by, let's not wait a year. Let's kind of predict the cohorts, and then we have a notion of which channel brings us better, not immediate revenue, but like long-term revenue. And that would give you a notion of, okay, who's performing better now? Where should we allocate budgets, right?
Yeah.
And this drives certain constraints. The minimization of error here should be on the cohort level, because you don't care about particular user. You care about, well, this whole bundle versus that whole bundle versus that whole bundle. So from an ML perspective, you want to minimize the cohort level. Second thing is, you're allowing yourself a bit more time to learn, because there's no pressure from from the ad platform. Hey, give me the input right now. This is the optimization window. There's also going to be an exponential decay. Please do me a favor as soon as you know, immediately. So there's not that much pressure. You can kind of wait a week.
Yeah.
And with these three things in mind, cohort level, minimizing errors on that way, having dramatically more time to get good predictions going on, that calls for one type of solution. We call it type 1 PLTV.
But when you're posting back to networks, there's the cohort level doesn't, because presumably you need to do it per user, don't you?
Exactly. So that's the one of the biggest differentiators, right? Like, you really want to do it user level. You want to do it as a post-back, like post-conversion event.
Yeah.
You're tied in terms of the time, and also this whole orchestration/activation we just talked about. And the minimization of error should not be done on a cohort level. You really care about user level minimization there of, what you call over under a bit, right? So that whoever you're coming in with, let's say it's a value optimization, that it should be as close as you can to, if they're great, you can pay more than the CPA target.
Right? Yeah.
But if they're awful, well, there's no point in having any. So, the whole flatlining of saying, oh, let's just pay you for conversion is absolutely ridiculous. And being able to take your data to figure it out is kind of key. but that type of sort of complex of this feedback loop, running a PLTV model, then running a causal refactoring on that, we would call this a type 2 PLTV model, right?
Okay. So type one would be used more internally for budget allocation then, I guess, and type 2 is user level, going for the postbacks, trying to optimize the traffic that's being sent to you in the first place.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think one of the things that we noticed in the past, vast majorities of gaming companies have a good already, or at least a decent type 1 PLTV model.
Yeah.
So that's my big, I remember like seeing Predict the first time thinking, trying to solve for type 1, people care about type 2, interesting.
Do you think people sort of understand understand that it's possible, I guess, and B, understand the value within type 2 though?
Well, understanding it's possible, as you just said, people always had the idea of tampering with the input signal.
I mean, the more advanced companies, yes, but then there's going to be lots that have never even got to that point, anyway. It's sort of I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, so I'd say 50-50. So 50% of my calls end up with, what? Could you? Like, is that because they don't even
do that?
Yeah, because you don't even think, wait, what am I telling the app for? I'll give you an anecdote.
But is there a concern from your customers? Is there a concern that could irritate the ad networks, or because you're potentially giving them wrong information? Is there any concern there, or does it not matter?
First of all, I think it has to be a concern, right? It would be irresponsible to think, oh, let's just send another signal and see what's up.
Yeah,
right? It could colossally fail, right? So you really want to be very responsible while you do it and sort of introduce it sort of nice and slow. Would the customers who never thought about it immediately jump to that conclusion? That's a bit hasty. I feel like they're still kind of in the shock of, wow, wait, oh my God, The more savvy ones, definitely the ones that tried it and failed. You sort of have this very, tell me exactly what you did. I'd say when I go to talk to one of the top 10, most of the conversations, I can feel them trying to fish, okay, how do I do the activation right? Which incidentally, I'm happy to do, because I feel like we should really democratize a little bit of that knowledge.
So which networks do you currently work? Does this work across anybody, or is it the main sort of self-reporting networks and that kind of stuff?
Fair question. So first of all, you could have always used it if you wanted to spoof the signal. What do I mean by this? Nobody has to give you a designated place for PLTV or any custom, value-based event. You could have just, let's say, a network you don't care about, something you just started, you don't care about reporting, just report instead of revenue, report PLTV, right?
Yeah.
That's one way to do it. We would highly not recommend it.
Yeah.
But as it stands, some networks, the way we see it, especially, let's say, the non-SRNs, right, where they definitely didn't build it, then that's the way to go. If you do conversion optimization, most networks already have a nice way to set up, a conversion event, high PLTV user, and that's.
Do you ever do it as a? I remember at one point we sort of tried looking into doing a kind of scoring system. So we would put a value on those users, and it may not be directly correlated to LTV, but obviously LTV is the main driver for buying traffic in the first place. But there may be other reasoning for bringing traffic in. Is there a way of being able to tie in different events to an overarching score that you could then say, we want more users like this?
Yeah, so you're describing something that I don't see a lot in gaming. I see a lot in training platforms, for example, where there's a bit of a mixed, it's not just revenue. It could be P&L. It could be like the number of activities, things that they care about a little bit more. Dating websites where they have to care.
To be honest, though, I think that's something that because of the whole deterministic model and the way everything has worked for gaming over a long period of time, I don't think people have really dived into the full extent of looking at engagement and those kind of areas, because they know that they can get a specific ROAS, and that is enough to be able to run the game or keep the machine ticking over.
Yeah.
I think if there was more of a deep dive into these kind of areas, that could be very interesting from the gaming perspective.
But consider this holistically, right? Because as a service, what we do is essentially to use deep learning networks on the entirety of the data. So it's always good for any mathematical model to focus on one objective, and that objective could be predicting for revenue. But then when you're thinking about it in this way, it's more like the input space. What are the sum of activities? Which type of activities were done? Which button was pressed then? How many times were this?
So does your algorithms take all sorts of different things into account then? It's not just the purchase.
Yeah, behavior takes a fair amount of the importance. So we say that the gold nuggets are found in Firebase logs and in these types of analytic logs. So yeah, absolutely, without a doubt, that's one of the main drivers for the successful cases. So so to answer that question, we don't try to temper and find like very bizarre methods of ranking users, but we literally give it to a much more sophisticated model that normal is used, and then find commonalities across users who on day one look like this and on day 180 would look like that. And that literally means the entirety of the events, the features in the beginning, user agent, things like that.
Yeah.
But circling back to the question you just asked, sometimes outside of gaming, we see that they care sort of to create a bit of a mix of users, and the objective function is not just what is going to be the prediction of 90-day revenue, but what's going to be the 90-day prediction of P&L, or 90-day prediction of the percentages of between male and female in the marketplace, for example. But for gaming, I would find it amazing if a gaming company comes to us and doesn't put 90-day ROAS.
Isn't just on revenue.
Yeah. Oh, we really care that our players are using the crossbow.
Yeah. It makes sense. So, what's next? I'm intrigued. Like, where do you go from here?
So now that we've understood, let's call it the convex set of gaming, to know that, it's going to be the hybrid, the IAPs, the ones with spearmint correlation below 0.8. A lot of it has to do with just executing it very well, making sure that we give the community a lot of space to try things on their own, because realistically, one of the things I think most important here is to make sure that everybody gives it a try before they go to go for a service. I think the learnings you get when you come to a company like ourselves and you've already tried it, there's a bunch of things that we say that would mean absolutely nothing if you didn't try it. It's a little bit like, I don't know, letting you assemble an IKEA closet before coming with like a really good carpenter.
Well, I mean, fundamentally, it doesn't really make sense, does it? You're sending like wrong answers back to a network to try and get improved traffic, which on the face of it is like, well, why am I going to be lying to a network to bring in better that doesn't make sense.
In a way, Adam, when you think about it now, right, and you think, wait, let's say that I now have a spearmint correlation of 0.6, meaning that however I looked at day 3 users is not at all connected in a good way to my ultimate revenue. How is it in 2025 that it still happens on the vast majority of gaming companies, like the most advanced? I honestly don't know. So, and again, we are talking to the biggest players in that field, and I think it's maybe it needed an experience of a lot of gaming companies at the same time before you have a sort of a more or less deterministic answer. We have talked to companies who've cracked it. I can count them on one hand on their own.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I wasn't sure. I thought that I'll talk to all the Israeli companies, being an Israeli proud and stuff, and thinking like the majority of them already not only tried it, but half of their traffic is going through PLTV right now. And the big ones, that's very true, but really the absolute biggest one.
I think it takes a lot of focus, you know, from especially from like data science teams and that kind of thing, to because of the kind of drop off. You know, like I was saying before, you do it for a couple of weeks and then it sort of drops off a little bit. I think because it doesn't remain constant, it takes a constant work to be able to maintain that, and that could be spent elsewhere. I think a lot of companies sort of don't give it the kind of full attention. So it does drop off and then gets a bit forgotten about, and maybe it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting. Also, maybe like the reliance, thinking, okay, well, it should be the ad platforms that would solve it.
Like, if it wasn't for you guys, a lot of people would be trying to do this in-house, which is nowhere near as easy anyway. I mean, like,
yeah, I think regardless, and you know, we definitely see the whole build versus buy, absolutely. Yeah. And I really just want to fuel it a bit more, right? I really want to give it as much, and yeah, happy to send links in that discussion for, you know, the types of models that we're using. I think again, try to build it at home is always great.
We'll link them in the video below.
Yeah, there's a really good bunch of people.
So why? Okay, so we're running out of time, but just last pitch from you. Why, in terms of the build versus buy kind of discussion that we were just having, why would I potentially move away from what we're doing internally to start working with you?
If you've already started internally, the best thing you can do is to run it in parallel with best in class to figure out, you know, exactly how good is your stuff. Given the double
verification,
digit, you know, given the double digit, expectation here in terms of day 60 ROAS, I think, you know, you should be in a company that allows you to experiment on that type of kind of relatively big opportunity size. If you didn't start building it yourself, it's going to be expensive, right? It is. I think we could be fully replaced by a team of 10 people. Like if they, you know, if you now take 10
but that's a hell of an investment when it's not your core activity.
You could pretend like you can do it with 3, right? And then you find the hard points. But you know, 10 is 6 to 10 depending on the seniority level. That's what you'd expect. And most importantly, I think there is going to, like in perpetuity, going to be a bit of a mismatch between data people and the UA people inside companies.
Yeah.
And that stuff, you know, when you navigated it 25 times in the past, that's one thing. If you're now in a company that has whoever knows which culture, it could go well. It could also backfire, because as this thing is going to tank the first weeks, there will be some
the fingers of blame start pointing.
Yeah. A little bit easier to point the finger to an external service, I'll give you this.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, you know, big, you know, what do you call it? Like high risk, high reward type value proposition. Yeah. And as such, you know, up to anybody's guess if they want to build versus buy. But when I'm thinking of, high risk, high reward for my own company, I would think, you know, it's not our main business, right?
I think from my previous experience of like building platforms internally, it's great to begin with, and then there's always this, you know, people who have full understanding of the platform end up leaving, you know, for whatever reason, and then it kind of just gets a bit forgotten about, and then you get to the point where nobody wants to touch it because something may break, and so nothing gets updated on it, and then it turns into this elephant in the room.
The one maybe biggest thing I can say for people who didn't start building, or like one of the strongest suits for Churney, is that it's at this point there's 12 PhDs working here in causal statistics or machine learning. 3 of those did their PhD in particular on something called sequence-to-sequence self-attention models, and that gives you 2 properties. One of them is not so good, the other one is amazing. The property that is not so good is that we kind of lose explainability. So when our clients want to know what drove a good return of investment in terms of clients, we'd be like, I don't know, you know, it's at this point it's broken down to many like tiny.
Just trust us, keep using it.
I'm not saying it happily. I don't like it that deep learning is so unexplainable. But the good thing is that it's robust, meaning that you can change the game however you please. You can change, you know, you can get out whatever version, and there's no need to update the model. It would sort of gradually learn when there's a new feature coming up, so long as the revenue events are not messed up. So we say we need the revenue events well understood. We need the time signature well understood. We need user ID binding across tables well understood. The rest don't tell us. And we're not very interested. It will either be picked up by the model or it's not predictive, so who cares, right? So you sort of have this situation, and I'd say I definitely recommend whoever wants to start doing it on their own. If you go the feature engineering route, you know, you'd be landing in a situation that it may work for a while, but every change you're making, you're going to have to update the model, and you're kind of in, let's call it the zombie land of maintaining
Yeah, for sure.
kind of a complex data science project. So if you want to do it on your own, again, I'll send you the link. Start from that paper. You'll be in a much better state for it.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Likewise, Adam.
I find it a fascinating area.
I'm sorry that I took Roy from you. You're doing remarkably well. I wish I would find 100 more Roys.
Roy's fantastic. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I appreciate it, Adam. Thank you very much. And it was as good as I thought it would be. Roy was not wrong.